So Sweden has more or less become a war zone, and I couldn't believe some of the things I was reading when I was researching this. Like, I was actually speechless, which, considering I've been doing this for quite some time now, takes a lot, and I didn't realise just how bad it was. And I think the best epitomisation of this is this headline here: more than one explosion a day in Sweden as gang violence spirals out of control. And the byline is, Sweden is facing an unprecedented wave of gang-related bombings with 32 explosions in 28 days, prompting the government to considering lowering the criminal age to 14 as violence escalates and criminals increasingly use financial extortion and digital recruitment to expand their operations. So basically, loads of foreign criminal gangs have moved into Sweden. No bonus marks for guessing their background, because I think we all know it is the usual suspects. Who likes doing this sort of thing? Well, I think we know, don't we? So it's also the fact that they're using young teenagers basically as part of it, which is why Sweden's going after them, and they're hiring people from abroad in a sort of marketplace of online criminality, and there are like sort of set rates if you want to kill someone. Apparently it varies depending on which city in Sweden you're in. It's 50,000 euros for one, 80,000 for another, but they've sort of got a menu for crime, because criminality has got so extensive. And of course, Sweden used to be one of the safest countries on planet Earth. And so this U-turn is not that the native Swedes have just decided, we're sick of peace and quiet, we want crime. No, it is not the natives, of course. And Stockholm alone has witnessed 21 explosions in the past month, which is insane to me. Yeah. That a major European city can experience that level of what amounts to basically gangland terrorism.
This is a situation of emergency. There was yesterday a post that listed the bombings that have taken place in January in Sweden, and it literally reads like a band's tour schedule. Literally, it's just insane.
Literally.
Every single day, just
it's 30 bombings, and it's the 31st of January.
I know, yeah. Very tenacious, aren't they? So, the Swedish Prime Minister has called the bombing crisis domestic terrorism, which I think is reasonable. I think if someone's bombing, every day, over, twice a day sometimes, then I think that's fair to say. And police have arrested 50 individuals in 25 different cases, including bomb makers, the perpetrators themselves planting the bombs, and the gang leaders operating from abroad, of course. And apparently the nature of these bombings has changed. So originally it was about territorial disputes between various ethnic gangs, and now they're more being used as a retaliative measure to target businesses that refuse to be extorted. So it's deliberately...
Like a mafia.
Yeah, exactly. And it seems to be that they're saying, it's like extorting protection money, isn't it, really? Like all mafias do.
In Sweden, of all places, like you said, it used to be one of the most homogenous, peaceful places in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I remember...
Terrible.
It's a tragedy, isn't it, that this has been imposed upon the Swedish people, because they don't deserve this.
Obviously, yeah.
And you can look at things like this as well. Hand grenade attacks have more than doubled in 2024, and they're already quite high.
They're already insanely high.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
what other country suffers from spates of grenade attacks?
Apparently, by mid-October, there had been 22 recorded grenade attacks, up from 9 in 2023, which is 9 too many, and certainly 22 too many. Yeah. And even in Britain, which is quite multicultural these days, we're not getting this level of things going on, are we? Of course, Sweden's a little bit further along than we are, but even so, this is just... I couldn't believe the actual scale of it. It's worth mentioning as well that Sweden's got a population of 10.5 million, officially at least, and so these numbers might not seem high to you if you're American and you live in a very big country, but in Europe, in a small European country, this is a similar population to that of the City of London. And so it would be unprecedented if, say, the City of London had seen a bombing every day.
The question is, why has this happened?
Hmm.
Because I'm not aware of any kind of vote of the Swedish to just open up the borders and just voluntarily put up with crime and mafias of the sort.
No, exactly. So it's also worth mentioning 3 out of 4 murderers in Sweden are committed by migrants. So there's a hint at the picture of who's doing what here. And I mean, I don't know whether that remaining 1/4 is people who've been there for multiple generations. I didn't necessarily look into specifics of it.
The issue again is the per capita, how crime is distributed to.
The gun murders per capita in Stockholm are 30 times that of London.
Yep.
And it goes on in London quite frequently, doesn't it, Bo? Sorry, I'm asking you not because you're a gun criminal, but because you're familiar with the city of London compared to me.
Yeah, I mean, Sweden on the map geographically is reasonably big, but a lot of it is sort of, how to say it, not tundra exactly, but a lot of it isn't, it's not urbanised.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got a few cities, right, a few big
Very
cities.
weighted towards the south.
And a few towns. So basically they've been flooded with unbelievably violent criminals.
Yeah.
From
Some
abroad.
of the worst criminals in Europe by the looks of it and by the sounds of it.
I wonder why Sweden, of all places, because it's like, they're not, I don't think these things happen in, as badly anyway, in Norway or Denmark or Finland or Estonia, but specifically Sweden. I wonder why exactly.
Well, I have some data to reveal that, but sorry, Stelios.
No, before you say this data, I want to say that if anyone told me about this about a month ago, I would say, no, this doesn't happen in Sweden. But maybe there are so many other stuff that we haven't yet heard about Scandinavia and other countries. It could be
It's possible, yeah. Although some of the other countries, like the Danes, are pretty good on mass migration in that they don't have much of it and they collect comprehensive data.
I'm willing to make a guess and say that it has to do a lot with welfareism.
I think that the Swedes are very generous in what they offer to foreigners, and also the kinds of people that have migrated to Sweden. Let me give you a bit of a clue. A man who burned the Quran was shot dead in his flat in Sweden recently. He was actually going through court because of what he did. And I think he was originally, I imagine he's still considered one, an Iraqi. Yeah. So it's interesting that presumably a former Muslim is there burning a Quran, and he doesn't even get through his court trial for doing so, which is also ridiculous, let it be said, before someone kills him.
In his own flat?
Yeah. Shot dead overnight, apparently. Unbelievable. But yeah, this was just yesterday. I didn't have to look far. All of these things have happened in the past month. So it's just going to show how extensive it is. And yeah, it's talking about...
Wasn't Sweden supposed to be socialist paradise?
Apparently so. Apparently socialists just really like grenade attacks for some reason and killing people. Well, that's true. So also the person may be linked to a foreign power, Reuters is saying for some reason. So let's have a look at some of the data, shall we? Here is Peter Sweden, aptly named as he is Swedish. 62,000 people are now involved in criminal gangs in Sweden. Remember the population, 10.5 million. We have almost 60 no-go zones. There were 149 bombings last year. We have one of the highest sexual assault rates in the world. And he's saying that socialist policies destroyed Sweden, basically, his home country. And I can't disagree with that, really. It seems pretty fair that both the combination of open borders and welfare is just a recipe for disaster here. And we're seeing the consequences here.
You pay people to not work and also not assimilate.
Exactly. And here I am, rather immodestly, showing one of my own tweets, but it illustrates an important point. If you look at gun crime deaths as a per capita rate, Sweden is lodged between Albania and Bosnia. And what is significant about Albania and Bosnia? Well, they are the two Muslim majority countries in Europe. And so the fact that Sweden's in between them is a little bit prophetic. It tells you something about the kind of people that might have migrated there. And in fact, we know that a lot of these people are from Islamic countries. And if we go to some other data, here we are. We can see relative. These are the blue line is those of a Swedish background, as the data labels it, and the sort of pinkishy colour is difficult to tell because the screen glare here is the first generation immigrant, and then the green is the second generation. And as we can see, deadly violence and robbery relative to the natives massively overrepresented, but also the second generations lead the way by a pretty decent margin. Crimes against life and health, the first generation, and crimes against liberty and peace. I don't even know what that means. Sexual crimes, the first generations are overrepresented, which these sorts of things mirror the nature of crime all across Europe, really. We can see certain crimes where the first generation are more likely to commit it than the second generation, but also some of the worst ones, like deadly violence, for example. It's the second generation of immigrant that's doing it. And so the problem isn't simply just the people who are born abroad and moved here, it's also their children, and even more so in some cases their children. Think about, say, the Southport killer. He was second generation, and look what he did. And so it's very obvious to me that the problem isn't so much just, it's assimilation, because no, actually, the more time people spend there, the worse they get, not better, relative to the native population. And it's something that the native population shouldn't have to put up with. And here is some more stuff here. This is some Swedish data. So this is, I think, the backgrounds. So North African and African other are massively overrepresented. Central Asia and West Asia, so some of the more Muslim countries, Pakistanis perhaps. And then we can see here, like US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand is basically on parity with those of Swedish background. Nordics, except Sweden, only slightly overrepresented, but not by the same degree as countries outside of Europe. The countries outside of Europe are just massively overrepresented, except for maybe South Asia and, East Asia as well is actually underrepresented, which mirrors entirely what we've been saying for years.
Chinese or Koreans or Japanese.
Yeah,
or something.
exactly.
What's interesting is that the Swedes themselves are not very criminal.
No.
The native Swedes,
Mm-hmm.
as we know from the era before they opened their borders.
Exactly.
Very, very peaceful country.
It's not that the Swedes themselves have changed.
So
it's the nature of who is Swedish.
An entirely imported crime wave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was
The
entirely
very worst
preventable.
types of crime.
Yeah, it is the worst types of crime, and it's something that's entirely preventable and was politically imposed upon them, much the same as lots of other European countries.
If we go back to the addition and the conjunction between open borders and welfarism, you see how this all is a recipe for disaster, because it says essentially let the borders be open and let us just give too much money as social provisions, and let's just increase spending for social provisions. And this actually has a hidden layer of evil behind it, because it literally lends to the narrative of all this is an issue of insufficient money given to people who perpetrate this such crime.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have a welfarist background, a very leftist welfarist mindset, and you think that all crime comes from lack of economic prospects, then the only way to react to this is by saying, well, let us just flatten out economic inequalities, let us tax the Swedish more in order to give more money to these people so crime diminishes.
And of course, that'll make the problem worse, won't it?
Yeah.
And we can look at things like Danish data, and the Danes keep very good records of the nationality of origin and crime conviction rates here. And you can see that lots of countries like Kuwait, Somalia, Lebanon, Tunisia, Jordan, Uganda, Iraq, Morocco, Algeria, Ethiopia, Syria, Afghanistan, Egypt, Iran, Turkey, Kenya, Ghana, all overrepresented. For some reason Myanmar's up there. I didn't realise they'd get many people from there. But Pakistan, Tanzania. So basically it is Africa and the Islamic world that are massively overrepresented. And then you start getting to European countries down here in the light blue. And there's such a clear distinction between the two here, aren't there? That, you know, you're not getting...
Yeah, you'd say that also for Europe, the Danish are a bit rambunctious.
It's funny, I've seen this stuff before, and I'm always surprised. Well, it's surprising to me that Kuwait, because Kuwait's number one there.
Mm-hmm.
Kuwait's tiny.
But that's because of the per capita aspect of it, isn't it? Like, you could have
So
one
one
violent...
crazy Kuwaiti gang.
And that'll bump it right up.
All right.
And then, of course, there's lots of data here from Austria, Belgium, Finland, France, Greece, Ireland, Italy, and Sweden that the migrants are a net fiscal drain. So I think Sweden's this last one here. So you can see...
non-EU, it was saying.
Yes, so we've got the natives here in dark blue that contribute the most and take the least. Then intra-EU, slightly less so. And then extra-EU, you can see that the amount that they actually contribute to the economy doesn't outweigh the amount they take from it in later life. So they're not net contributors at all, actually. And you can see that very clearly here, that this part of the graph under the line is much more significant than the part over it. It's not even close. In fact, it's almost 2 to 1, just from eyeballing it, and it may well be that they take twice as much as they provide. And so, yes, Sweden has imported foreign criminals who basically tyrannize and terrorize the native population, and they're paying for it in the same way that many other European countries are as well.
And here is precisely what is going to happen if you add DEI, inequality of opportunity, and all these things. Again, it's going to lead towards a narrative that says, let us give even more material.
Well, what would happen would be all of the peaks would lower, and everyone would be worse off, wouldn't they? That's how it would work. So I'm going to quickly fire through what is actually being done, and I'm just going to say what's happening ever so quickly, and then summarize what needs to be done further. So in September of 23, they introduced new rules for labour migrants. Basically, work permits will only be made available to those labour migrants in Sweden who earn a salary of at least 80% of the Swedish median salary. That was to mitigate some of the financial damage that it's doing. And then in October of 23, they made it harder for non-European migrants to claim benefits. And then in August of 24, they were discussing paying Swedish passport holders that are foreign-born the equivalent of $1,000 to leave Sweden, basically paying a sort of Danegeld to get rid of the foreign gangs. But of course, if you've got an illegal, they can just keep on coming back and rinsing you of that grand each time. Although I still think it would be better than doing nothing, even though I think the idea of paying foreign people that are extorting you money to leave is weak, and you shouldn't have to resort to that.
It's got to be the Bukele solution.
Imprison them, yeah.
You just round up everyone involved, known to be involved, and you put them in a maximum security prison for a long, long, long time.
Yeah. Well, if they're not native, get rid of them.
Or deport them.
Mm-hmm.
At the end, either before or at the end of their sentence, they're deported. Just not allowed in the general population anymore.
Well, they're obviously not safe, are they?
It's not allowed among normal, civilised humans.
Mm-hmm.
God's sake.
And here's another one. This was from August of 24 as well. Basically, they introduced a law which would force public sector workers to report undocumented migrants, basically. And, of course, this is the Guardian saying it's utterly inhumane to report people illegally in your country if you're a public official, which is obviously ridiculous.
Do they have any article now saying how inhumane the bombings are?
No. Funnily enough, they don't.
The humanity of those victims, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So
some people are more human than others.
So here in October, they were having tougher rules. They actually talked about introducing DNA testing to see if someone was part of a family before reunifying them. I personally think that who cares? If you've come to the country, if anything, you should be removed. If you want to join your family, you can all go back home. You don't all have to move here, do you? You don't have a right to another person's country to bring your whole family across. That's never, ever been something that has existed until recently, which is ridiculous as well, of course. And they are actually getting a bit more serious about addressing these problems because they're pretty obvious now, aren't they? And there was this story, which people leaving Sweden will exceed immigrants in 2024, but it wasn't quite true. Here's another one. This was European Conservative reporting the same thing. It went around, but actually, if you read a Swedish language thing, which is translated here, it was just that the tax agency had a backlog of things it was processing and then processed loads of them at once, which made it look like there was net emigration. So it was just an administration thing rather than a net emigration. And there is this, though, as of the 30th of January, yesterday, a record number of foreigners are leaving Sweden to move to Germany. And what does that say about the foreigners? Well, what it says is that they're going to a country with more lucrative welfare. It's not so much that Sweden stopped being appealing to them, it's just that they can get a better gig elsewhere, which suggests, to my mind, that they're only there to rinse the native Swedes of their money, and then they're going to leave, which is obvious.
They are transigent.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, whatever's the best deal for them, the actual physically where you live doesn't matter that much.
Mm-hmm.
They've got no roots to the land.
Well, of course they don't, because they're from abroad. And this is one of the measures that is being taken to potentially address the concerns, because they've got full prisons and they don't know what to do with all of the people that they need to send to prison. And they're actually looking at sending inmates abroad as their prisons are full in this crime wave. And another thing that they were looking at doing was fast-tracking a new law to tackle these bombings by allowing the police basically to wiretap people under the age of 15, because previously obviously there are ethical concerns, but because these foreign criminal gangs are using teenagers and young people, it gives them a certain level of protection within the law. And so you have to change the law to actually tackle these people because they're using the fact that they're young to get around the law and not get punished.
So these, within quotation marks, humane policies have led to the state contemplating wiretapping teenagers.
Yes.
So just an extra layer of scumbag behaviour is that they use children loads for this. Because that was what you led with right at the top, which I wasn't aware of, about the extremely young age of the people involved.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just an extra layer of filth that these people are engaged in.
Like, this is one of those things that I think is just undeniably a completely negative picture of immigration. The Swedes have gained nothing but negatives from this so-called deal. And I mean, you look at other statistics as well, like, was it 4 or 5 Italian women get raped every day by a foreigner? The rates of crime in France, it's clearly a scourge on Europe. We were much better off before mass migration, and it's entirely obvious to anyone who has a rudimentary look at the data about what's going on, about how it's impacting the native population, and at least Sweden's trying to do stuff to fix it, and I think they're going to be one of the countries, because they're so badly affected by it, that's going to be leading the way in pushing back against this, and hopefully they're going to get to a point where they actually address the real solution to this, which is mass deportations. I don't see any other scenario working better than that.
Surely in Sweden's case, remigration is inevitable.
Oh yes.
I know that's one of the...
Well, it's remigration or be conquered.
Yeah.
Those are the options, and I know which one I would pick as a Swede.
I know some people say, when I say things like this, various people in the dissident right say things like this. I wrote an article, didn't I, saying remigration is inevitable. I'm not the first one in the world to have said it, but some people say that's just cope, that's never going to happen, you're a far-right fantasist, whatever, people actually don't want that, da-da-da-da-da.
But it's obviously what needs to be done.
Yeah, but it actually, I honestly think that is true. Mm-hmm. It must be inevitable.
It's not even like a rhetorical device. Right. It's just, if our country is to continue existing, I say that for all the European countries, if our nations in Europe are to continue existing, we need to send people home, because we can't coexist.
Because Sweden is simply a bit further down the road, is all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
That's all it is.
Like
They're
there's a very
smaller petri dish, so it's more obvious more quickly.
You can even sort of put countries on a hierarchy. So Japan's just started getting mass migration, and you can see them going through exactly the same motions that all the European countries have, almost, note for note. So there's almost like a textbook, a playbook. A pattern, exactly, that it operates under. But yes, if you live in Sweden, I honestly hope you stay safe, and I hope your government can actually do something. And if they do, you're going to be helping Europe, because you're going to be setting a precedent to show that actually you can get these things under control, and I really hope that it does work. If you would like to watch the full uncut version that is also uncensored, head on over to lotuseaters.com to find out more.